In early 1958, cereal manufacturing company Kellogg's was interested in sponsoring a children's show for marketing purposes. Originally a part of a weekday lineup featuring programs aimed at kids such as Wild Bill Hickok, The Adventures of Superman, and rebroadcast of Woody Woodpecker shorts, Joseph Barbera pitched the idea of a cartoon to Kellogg's executives through their ad agency Leo Burnett. After looking through the scripts and characters, they liked what they saw and bought it.
Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear. Yogi Bear is always in the ranger's hair. The biggest show in town is Huckleberry Hound, for all you guys and gals. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, looking for you. Scooby-Doo-Doo, where are ya? Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, have a Hanna-Barbera
The Huckleberry Hound show featured the antics of a slow-talking blue southern dog with different jobs in each episode. The show would feature 3 different segments, so that would be easier to script if ever the audience or sponsor disliked a particular segment. Huck was voiced by Dawes Butler, who played a similar sounding character in several Tex Avery Droopy cartoons.
So anyway, Huckleberry Hound was more laconic and laid back, and I got the idea for him down in North Carolina, where my wife was from, Albemarle, North Carolina. And when I was in the Navy, I'd come home on a weekend with my little ditty bag sailor and hitchhike, you know. And so this fellow would be sitting on the front porch next door. He was a veterinarian, worked with her daddy as a veterinarian too. And he'd see me come in, you know, panting just to see Murtis. And he'd say, "Hi, Dawes, come on in and set yourself down. What's going on?" He probably hadn't seen me for 3 weeks, you know, or a month. I'd say, "Oh, you know, about the same," and go for the thing. He'd say, "Come on up, sit down, we'll talk a little bit." I said, "Well, maybe a half an hour or so, an hour, you know. Anytime, come on back, I want to talk to you." So anyway, it kind of stuck in my head, and I was in the Navy then, but I put him in a little separate box. I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then when Huckleberry Hound came up, there he was, you know.
Other segments of the show included Pixie and Dixie and Mr. Jinx, a continuation of the Tom and Jerry concept about 2 mice and a dumb cat who hates them to pieces, and perhaps the most famous segment of the show, Yogi Bear, about a smart Alec bear and his sidekick Boo Boo stealing picnic baskets while trying to avoid the park ranger, Ranger Smith. This character would be just as popular as Huckleberry and became a superstar in his own right, spinning off into his own series in 1960, along with many follow-ups, merchandise, and becoming one of the studio's mascots. The Huckleberry Hound show debuted in syndication in 1958 and became a surprise hit. Critics and audiences fell in love with the likable array of characters and the witty puns and humor, as well as being the breath of fresh air from all the detective private eye shows debuting that season, and it was a hit in ratings. This show would pave the way for more funny animal Hanna-Barbera cartoons throughout the 60s, like the Quick Draw McGraw Show, the aforementioned Yogi Bear Show, Magilla Gorilla, and many others, while fan clubs and merchandise grew. On the night of the 1960 Emmy Awards, the show made history as the first ever animated series to win for Outstanding Children's Program, and made HB Enterprises, now Hanna-Barbera Productions, a household name, as well as the leaders of television animation.
Barbera Hanna would look great on the top of the building.
You'd be my guest.
Oh, sure.
Now that they made their mark on syndication and Saturday mornings, there is one area of television Bill and Joe were dying to experiment with: prime time. When the Huckleberry Hound show debuted, Bill and Joe were shocked to learn that a large percentage of the 16 million views the show had were adults and college students, and bars would frequently advertise the show during happy hour. According to Joe Barbera,
in one San Francisco bar favored by the college crowd, the barkeep would ring a bell at 6 in the evening when the show was aired and direct the patrons' attention to a sign that announced, "No tinkling of glasses or noise during the Huckleberry Hound show."
This persuaded the duo to create the very first original adult-oriented primetime animated sitcom, which of course became the Flintstones, a Stone Age take on the traditional sitcom featuring cavemen. With the loud-mouthed but well-meaning Fred, his snarky but loving wife Wilma, dopey best friend Barney Rubble, and his wife Betty. The idea of a primetime cartoon aimed at adults was unheard of at the time, and the road to make it happen was a long one. After all, this was the age of the Donna Reed Show, Red Skeleton, and General Electric Theater.
I mean, no one had even dared think about a Flintstone show. By that I mean a primetime animated show. Who could do that? I mean, how could you turn that out? A half hour a week? Are you kidding? You know?
The concept of the show went through many changes throughout its development.
Right. First we had a hillbilly family we tried, a Roman family, a Pilgrim family, Indian family. We finally got down to Cave. When we got to Cave, it was those things, like I said, Stoneway piano that got your mind going. Also, you were able to take anything that was current and convert it to Stone Age. Like clothespins were birds with beaks that would open up and they would hold the laundry. A vacuum cleaner was a small mastodon. We would put wheels under him and his snout would pick up. That was our vacuum cleaner. And we never addressed any attention to it. We just threw those things in and the kids loved it. So it became that kind of a thing.
The show was originally called the Flintstones, until they were forced to change the name due to the threat of legal action of High and Low's creator, Mort Walker, because the name sounded similar to his cartoon family, the Flintstones. A common trend of Hanna-Barbera cartoons was that their characters were spoofs of popular celebrities or TV shows at the time. Yogi Bear was based on comedian Art Carney, Snagglepuss was based on Bert Lahr, and the Hillbilly Bears was based on the Beverly Hillbillies. The Flintstones was no exception, as it was a send-up of the popular sitcom The Honeymooners. One of the people who took notice was Jackie Gleason. According to Marla Brooks, author of the book The American Family on Television,
Jackie's lawyers told him he could probably have the Flintstones cancelled if he wanted to, but in the same breath also asked, "Do you want to be known as the guy who yanked Fred Flintstone off the air? The guy who took away a show that so many kids loved and so many of their parents loved too?" Apparently, Jackie thought it over and decided to leave well enough alone.
Another influence on the Flintstones would arguably be the MGM cartoon The Last Bad Man, directed by Tex Avery, which features similar sight gags that would be seen on the show. Ed Benedict, who created the look of the Flintstones as well as many other early HB cartoons, was also the layout artist of the short.
He had a kind of an abstract way of drawing, and it was perfect for this simplistic design style for TV animation.
But he had a real strong flat UPA-like design style, which I think they felt would not only be simple to animate, but it was very bold. It had very, very strong outlines. It would read on TV sets no matter how bad the reception was. And he's a brilliant designer.
According to Joe Barbera, selling the show proved to be no easy task.
I mean, here we are with a brand new thing that had never been done before. An animated primetime show. So we developed 2 storyboards with Dan Gordon, whose picture I showed you. So now I go back to New York with this portfolio with 2 half-hour boards stacked in there and some other artwork. And we go along, I mean, and no one would even believe that you dared to suggest a thing like that. I mean, they looked at you as you were crazy. But slowly the word got out, because I used to do the presentation. But nobody bought it. I mean, you can go along and do this, which I did for 8 straight weeks. Pitch, 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 sometimes 5 a day. So finally, on the very last day, Leonard Goldenson, head of ABC, Danny Melnick, who was still around, and I think it was Tom Moore or Ollie Trays, showed up at the, I think it was my hotel, and bought the show in 15 minutes.
The show made its debut on ABC on September 1960 with the first episode, The Flintstone Flyer. And while critics weren't exactly kind to the show, with the New York Times calling it an ink and paint disaster, viewers made the show a surprise success, finishing the season at number 18 in the overall Nielsen ratings and giving ABC their bona fide hit that wasn't a Western. The Flintstones were memorable for breaking new ground in animation, such as the story arc of Wilma being pregnant with Pebbles, who was originally Fred Jr., and the implied issue of infertility, which led the Rubbles to adopt Bam Bam. Though because of this, the show shifted more towards families than adults. The show lasted 6 years for 166 episodes and was the longest running primetime animated series ever made, until 1997 when the Fox series The Simpsons broke the record and kept on going, and going, and going.
Still going, still going.
During and after the show's run, The Flintstones was a merchandising hit, selling everything from cigarettes, beer, even breakfast cereal that's still being sold to this day, not to mention many other toys and games. Starting in the 1970s, the show had a second life on Saturday mornings, with many revivals, with the last series, Cave Kids, airing in 1996, as well as many primetime television specials. The Flintstones also made many top greatest cartoon lists, and needless to say, it set the standard for many popular primetime adult cartoons. With its likable characters, timeless setting, and an all-star cast of voice actors, today, not only is The Flintstones regarded as Hanna-Barbera's best works, it's important to television animation in general.
Really was the first time that everybody could admit the cartoons were for everybody.
Now you have shows, animated shows, that have the similar kind of loyalty to them. In that way, the Flintstones kind of set us on the trend that we're on now.
The success of the Flintstones and many other shows created by HB will lead to more expanding the studio, as well as more crew members joining. Aside from former Warner Brothers storymen Warren Foster and Michael Maltese as head writers, and many of Bill and Joe's animators from MGM, new talent was brought in to keep up with the high demand, such as editors Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. Remember them, they'll be important later. And artists such as Don Luss, Bill Perez, Charles A. Nichols, and Jerry Eisenberg, son of MGM animator and comic artist Harvey Eisenberg. Another animator that would join the studio was a young Japanese man who worked at Disney as an assistant to the legendary Milt Kahl. He would go on to become one of the most prominent designers, and his name was Ibu Takamoto. They would also outgrow their old studio. In 1963, the crew moved to their new home at 3400 Cuenca Boulevard in Studio City, and remained there until 1997, while many cartoons came and went, such as the short-lived Top Cat, a primetime cartoon about a street-smart con artist cat and his gang based upon a similar character played by comedian Phil Silvers. Others made their debut, like the Jetsons. Similar to the Flintstones, it featured a family of the future as introduced in the theme song. George Jetson, his boy Elroy, daughter Judy, and Jane his wife. The show gave the artists many opportunities to play around with the inventions and futuristic technology. Writer and designer Tony Benedict brought in a book called 1975, showing what new ideas and appliances would be available in that year. The show debuted primetime on ABC in 1962 and became very popular with audiences, but had the misfortune of airing in a time slot against two bigger shows, CBS's Dennis the Menace and NBC's Wonderful World of Disney. After its run, the show was stuck in reruns on Saturday mornings from 1964 to 1983 on the Big Three networks, until being revived in 1987 for new episodes of syndication. Even though the Jetsons would reappear in the 70s and 80s, their caveman counterparts were far more popular. Recently at an age with clickbaity articles of The Simpsons predicting the future, one could argue that the Jetsons have predicted the future, as the technology seen in the cartoon has become our everyday devices, though sadly no flying car. Another cartoon in the 60s will make a bold departure from the funny animals and kid fare one would usually expect from Hanna-Barbera, and that show was Johnny Quest. This action series featured the globe-trotting adventures of an 11-year-old Johnny Quest, the son of brilliant scientist Dr. Benton Quest, as they travel the world with bodyguards Race Bannon, Johnny's best friend Haji, and the Quest dog Bandit, as they battle villains all over the world, such as Dr. Zen. Hanna-Barbera originally wanted to make the show based upon the radio serial Jack Armstrong All-American Boy, but dropped the idea when they couldn't afford the rights. They approached New York comic artist Doug Wildey to come up with the original action-adventure cartoon. Both men were impressed with Doug's work, particularly after he was able to show them that the comic book look was entirely producible for TV. The new show drew many inspirations from Jackie Cooper and Frankie Darro movies, comics such as Terry and the Pirates, as well as Joe Barbera's fascination with the James Bond movie Dr. No. The show also went through many name changes, such as the Saga of Chipaloo and Quest File 037, until finally settling on the Adventures of Johnny Quest. Quest being a name he picked out of the phone book for its adventurous implications. Doug Wildey was involved in every aspect of Johnny Quest. He supervised the show, wrote most of the storylines, cast the voice actors, and designed the main cast, except for the dog Bandit, who's designed by Dick Biggenbach. Originally, he objected to the idea of Bandit because he felt it was too cartoony for the type of show they were going for. But the character remained the show's comic relief, to offset the many villains, mummies, and robot spiders. The character Haji was also memorable, as it was the first time kids at home saw someone in a turban that wasn't a bad guy, and was just as smart and capable as his white co-stars. I know that doesn't excuse the other racist stereotypes, but yeah.
But Johnny, I am a nice guy. Unless you do not tell me where you find the Spanish doubloons.
Much like the Jetsons, Johnny Quest was also known for using futuristic technology.
Doug specifically mentioned that he was always looking into the popular science magazines for hints of what might be, so he could adapt it into the Quest format of super high-tech mechanisms and vehicles that they would always have in those shows. Part of the fun for us kids was to see those kind of things.
Johnny Quest was a plethora of fantastic vehicles.
The VTOL jet, that was so cool at the time. I thought science fiction. I didn't think there was anything that was ever going to be like that.
Young Johnny was voiced by a then 16-year-old actor, Tim Matheson.
It's called Jack Wormser Agency. They represented actors for commercials and some voiceovers. They had a kids division. Jack sent me over there to Hanna-Barbera to audition. I'd never done anything like that, and it was just a boom in and out. And it one of those things that just went away. I'd totally forgotten about it. You just assume, well, I didn't get that, so that goes, and you just move on. And then got called in, come on in and do it. And then I got an insight into what an industry it was, and the wonderful storied history of Joe Barbera and Bill Hanna, and what their contribution and significance was in the animation world. And I got a real sense of how hard it was. Dawes Butler, June Foray, Mel Blanc, Don Messick, Alan Freed, Vic Perrin, Olan Soule, all these people that I was working with, they were like the pros from Dover. They were these people that had a set of skills that I just couldn't imagine. They'd be recording the Flintstones or the Jetsons. I'd sit and watch how they did it. Then I'd go in and do Johnny, and they were more cartoon characters. We were characters based in reality.
Tim would go on to voice other Hanna-Barbera leading kid heroes, while his famous role later on will be in John Landis' hit comedy Animal House and in the NBC drama The West Wing. Haji was voiced by Danny Bravo, known for minor roles in films such as The Magnificent Seven. Western star Mike Road provided the voice of Race Bannon, while John Stevenson was the original voice of Benton Quest, before being replaced by Don Messick, who was also Bandit. The show's iconic villain, Dr. Zen, was voiced by actor Vic Perrin, who is best remembered as the control voice for the intro to The Outer Limits, while some of the other villains were voiced by Henry Corden, the second voice of Fred Flintstone.
This is Johnny Quest, where gripping adventure stories explode to life with blazing realism. Watch as full living animation makes possible a new kind of excitement never before seen on television. And it will happen every time you enter the incredible world of Johnny Quest, every week on ABC's Wide World of Entertainment.
Johnny Quest debuted September 18th, 1964 on ABC in prime time, and it was a huge success. However, it only lasted for one season. But why? Simply put, it was way over budget. Keep in mind, the animation in this show was a real game changer, and no other action cartoon looked like this. And some of the animators at HB couldn't authentically draw or animate in the old-fashioned comic style. According to Doug Wildey,
what I wanted was a moving comic strip with the blacks and shadow, and it became a matter of educating network people that creating and animating this kind of artwork didn't come cheap, because more artwork would be required and with much greater detail. These guys were used to drawing cartoon-type characters, and they'd come in and they were at a loss. They couldn't handle adventure stuff. Boy, did I get calls at night from guys who somehow thought that they were failures simply because they couldn't handle something like this, which of course was crazy. But these guys would keep saying, I'm not really that much up on anatomy. I haven't had anatomy in quite a while. I can't seem to handle the artwork doesn't look right. And I look at it and say, yeah, it sure doesn't look right. It doesn't work. In the beginning, I was the only straight man in the entire organization that could draw a reasonably decent-looking human figure.
Also during this time, the Flintstones were beginning to lose viewers to the Munsters, and rather than cancel the show, the network switched time slots with Johnny Quest, which led to the Flintstones to air on Thursday nights. Starting in 1967, the show would air reruns on Saturday mornings on the Big Three networks, where it would reach a new audience and gain massive popularity. The characters would be brought back in the short-lived 80s revival and the gritty 90s reboot, The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. In 2015, the Quest crew will make an appearance in the Tom and Jerry direct-to-video crossover film, Spy Quest. Despite its odd premise, the movie is pretty entertaining and does a great job of bringing the world of Johnny Quest into the 21st century. In later years, Johnny Quest has been a major inspiration to most modern shows and movies. Director Brad Bird, a huge fan of the series, has gone on record saying that Johnny Quest influenced his film The Incredibles. The show would also be a subject of affectionate parody, such as the Adult Swim series The Venture Bros.
Given the quality of Johnny Quest, it's a standard set that's hard to meet up to in the time since.
Johnny's place in cartoon history, in my opinion, is the best animated adventure show ever done.
Also coming this fall, Warner Brothers will be releasing the complete series of the Flintstones on Blu-ray for the very first time. The set will include all 166 episodes of the entire 6 seasons, remastered and restored in high definition, as well as 2 bonus movies, the theatrical Man Called Flintstones and Flintstones WWE Stone Age SmackDown. No new special feature has been announced yet, but I'm sure they will be lifted from previous releases. While no official release date has been given yet, I'm super excited for this to come out, and I can't wait to get it. If you would like to grab yourself a copy, use the Amazon affiliate links below in the description to pre-order it today. Hanna-Barbera was on top of the world. Many of their shows were hits among kids and adults, and their characters became pop culture icons overnight, with more and more cartoons added to the library.
Give me your hand, Joe, and I shall show you I am as strong as 100 men.
100 men? I'm afraid I can't believe that.
Here goes.
I believe it, I believe it.
The studio also experimented with live-action / animated fare, like the Emmy-winning special Jack and the Beanstalk, starring and directed by Gene Kelly, and even theatrical films based on their properties, like 1964's Hey There's Yogi Bear and 1966's The Man Called Flintstone. However, not everyone was a fan. The studio was heavily criticized for its use of limited animation, even nicknamed the General Motors of animation. Even Looney Tunes / Merry Melodies legend Chuck Jones dismissed the visual style as illustrated radio. Also in 1966, Hanna-Barbera's partnership with Screen Gems ended when the studio was sold to Taft Broadcasting for $12 million. The The sale was delayed for several months after the family of Harry Cohn, the founder of Columbia Pictures, filed a lawsuit regarding the sale a few years earlier of his private stock in the company. HB was fully incorporated to the Taft Broadcasting in 1968, and the company was focused primarily on Saturday morning cartoons, cutting back on its primetime productions and TV specials. And under Taft, the animation quality dropped lower. Simply put, there are way too many shows to make and not enough people or time to do any quality work. On top of that, many veterans like Mike Maltese, Dan Gordon, Warner Foster, and Tony Benedict will soon be replaced by younger staff without the same level of experience. According to Tony Benedict, the selling out of the studio was no surprise. We all saw it coming. The influence of advertisers were everywhere. They bought in on the early creation of shows, and Hanna-Barbera shows were now just 30-minute commercials, no more funny shows. That's when I departed. In addition, Screen Gems still owned the distribution and licensing rights to Hanna-Barbera's previous properties under 7-year contracts, and Taft couldn't touch the big money makers like Yogi Bear and Flintstones until the early 70s. Which is where we got stuff like Yogi's Gang and their new friend Barney show. The success of Jonny Quest led to Hanna-Barbera making more action cartoons, all of them from the mind of comic book legend Alex Toth, who worked on Jonny Quest. Shows like the Herculoids, Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, the Fantastic Four, Dino Boy in the Lost Valley, and perhaps his most famous creation, Space Ghost. These shows were huge hits on Saturday mornings, which received an outstanding 60% share in the ratings. 6 of the 10 Saturday morning slots on CBS during the 1967 season were filled by superhero series from Hanna-Barbera. Though these action cartoons were a hit with audiences, many parent groups thought the violence in the cartoons, as well as comics, was a bad influence on children. We'll get back to them, which led to them being replaced by lighter fare, such as the Banana Splits and Wacky Races. The Banana Splits, who were originally called the Banana Bunch, were presented to Hanna-Barbera by the Leo Burnett Agency, in which Kellogg's was a sponsor, an entire weekly hour of programming to ABC. However, they needed content. Hanna-Barbera's approach was something different. They made a show with their trademark funny talking animal characters, except this time, instead of being animated, they'd be live-action costume characters with real people in the suits, which confused the network and Leo Burnett when they were shown the concept art, courtesy of Jerry Eisenberg and Iwo Takamoto, and told it would be live-action and not animated. Hanna-Barbera went to pitch the show to Kellogg's, but Joe Barbera had an idea. He was going to pitch to them with a costume character in a room. Luckily, the studio had a Yogi Bear costume used for promotional purposes. Kellogg's were already familiar with Yogi since they sponsored the Yogi Bear show. The night before the pitch, Joe had the Yogi Bear costume quickly flown from California to Chicago, arriving just 6 hours before the meeting. As Joe Barbera was describing the Banana Splits, the Kellogg's chairman was falling asleep during the pitch. But as soon as the costume Yogi Bear walked into the room, worn by Jerry Eisenberg, it instantly caught everyone's attention. Jerry, as Yogi, pranced around the room, shaking hands, patting the execs on the heads, putting his arm around them, and sitting on their laps. The execs were thrilled, and it helped them sell the show. William Hanna and Joseph Barbera approached puppeteer sibling duo Sid and Marty Krofft to make the costumes for the 4 main characters.
Joe Barbera called me one day and asked me, if he knew we had people in suits and we did this.
And so that's when we built the Banana Splits. After we built them, Marty looked at me and said, "Oh my God, they're going to make a fortune. Why did we do that?"
They had the concept with Kellogg's of the Banana Splits. They came to us. We added a bunch of creativity to the thing, but it was theirs.
Sid and Marty themselves would become a driving force in children's entertainment, creating many hit kids shows in the 70s, such as Land of the Lost, The Bugaloos, Wonderbug, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, and H.R. Pufferstuffs. The live-action segments of the Banana Splits featured a band of 4 animals: Fleagle, a dog, performed by Jeff Winkles and voiced by Paul Winchell; Bingo, a gorilla, performed by Terrence Winkles; and voiced by Dawes Butler, Drooper, a lion, performed by Ann Withrow and voiced by Alan Melvin, and Snorky, a mute elephant who communicates by honking, and performed by James Dove and Robert Towns, and voiced by Don Messick. The segments drew much of its inspiration from Rowan Martin's Laugh-In, right down to this rapid-fire comedic timing and sight gags. The show also drew inspiration from the then-popular monkey sitcom Hey Hey It's the Monkeys. The outdoor scenes were shot on location at Six Flags Over Texas at Arlington, Texas. The characters would also drive around in their banana buggies, which was thought up by Joe Barbera after seeing it demonstrate on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Other segments included Danger Island, a live-action series reminiscent of Johnny Quest, directed by Richard Donner, who would go on to direct films such as Superman, Goonies, and a Lethal Weapon series. There were also animated segments, featuring obscure cartoons like The Three Musketeers and Arabian Nights. The show was a hit for NBC, and it had a good life of syndication. Many attempts at reviving the splits were rather short-lived. One notable comeback was the recent direct-to-video film by Sci-Fi. If you want to know my thoughts on the film, it stinks. The show's iconic theme, the Tra-La-La song, written by Kellogg's jingle writer N.B. Winkles Jr., who also wrote the Snap Crackle Pop jingle for Rice Krispie cereal, has also become more popular than the show itself, appearing in many top TV theme songs lists, covered by many artists, and peaked at number 96 on a Billboard Top 100. You might even hear it in the movie Kick-Ass. Wacky Races will be a return to the broad, zany, cartoony humor. It featured 11 racers racing against each other around the world. While all these races were memorable, such as Penelope Pitstop, Pat Pending, and a Gruesome Twosome, the ones that steal the show are, of course, Dick Dastardly and Muttley, the main villains who try to cheat to the top only to have their plans backfire, reminiscent of the antics of Wile E. Coyote. The show mainly took inspiration from the 1965 film The Great Race, and was originally going to be a part of a much larger show made by Heather Quigley Productions, who also did Hollywood Squares.
First thing that I remember hearing about was the fact that we were to create all of these characters with their cars. Then each week they would be involved in a race.
It was going to be more of a game where you had to send in who you thought was going to win the race every week or something like that.
And then there would be prizes given away for kids that would pick the winner. It was more of a game show than anything else. And of course, I think the powers that be stepped in and said, you can't do that. So anyway, it just became the show that it eventually evolved into.
The show lasted 17 episodes, but was really successful in ratings. Penelope Pitstop and Dastardly and Muttley became the show's breakout characters, and each one got their own spin-offs a season or two later. Hanna-Barbera would do variations of this concept in later shows, such as 1977's Laugh Olympics, 1985's Yogi's Treasure Hunt, and 1990's Fender Bender 5000, the latter two having Dastardly and Muttley as the show's villains. In 2006, a pilot was pitched to Cartoon Network for a Wacky Races revival, featuring the kids of Penelope Pitstop and Peter Perfect, as well as Dastardly and Muttley back to their old tricks. The short was not successful, but in 2017, a reboot series aired on the Boomerang streaming service for 2 seasons. Going back to what I said earlier about the parent groups, the now defunct Action for Children's Television was protesting against what they perceived as too much commercialism and violence in children's television. Originally, their first target was the TV series Romper Room, which sold toy products to viewers. Then their next target was the Hanna-Barbera action cartoons, Space Ghost, Frankenstein Jr., and the Herculoids, which were all canceled by 1969 due to pressure from parent groups. Even reruns like Johnny Quest and the Tom and Jerry shorts were heavily edited. This of course meant bad news for CBS executive Fred Silverman, who needed a new show fast, one that could keep his Saturday morning schedule afloat and to satisfy the angry moms. He contacted William Hanna and Joseph Barbera about developing said show. What was it? Well, join me in the next video. Before I wrap up, I want to give a special shout out to Hanna-Barbera veteran Tony Benedict, who was a big help in making this video. He has a Hanna-Barbera documentary of his own in the works called The Last Cartoonery, The Hanna-Barbera Story. I'll leave a link in the description so you can support if interested. He is also working on a book, so keep an eye out for that as well. If you want to support this series and many other videos, click the link below to my Patreon. You get a special credit, early access, shout out to your channel or blog, even a cartoon character commissioned by me. And also don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I thank you, and I gotta fly.
But what fun to wet your whistle and whistle your way back home. You